I want to ask you a serious question. What are you feeding your mind right now? If it's social media, are you tired of doom scrolling through the angry comment sections and political rants yet? What if you use that time to actually fix your marriage? Welcome to the free Married and Connected School community. It's like social media, but without the ads, without the judgment, and without the noise. Just real self-paced tools that get you out of that roommate phase starting today. Inside, you get an exact blueprint for a weekly State of the Union meeting with your spouse. We're cutting mental load, we're stopping miscommunications, and we're breaking that exhausting loop of doom argument once and for all. Plus, you get instant access to workshops on overcoming resentment and bringing the actual fun back into your marriage. We have a dedicated space just for guys jumping into Forging Fortitude. It's a 10-week intensive to help you step into your masculine leadership and become the husband and man that God called you to be. And for ladies joining Edifying Eden, we're stepping out of that controlling, nagging era into our soft, nurturing, feminine era, even if your husband hasn't taken the reins yet. Either way, you can take responsibility for your side of the street. Stop scrolling the internet and start investing in your home. The community is 100% free with options to purchase certain courses. Click the link in the show notes and join the Married and Connected School community today. I'll see you inside. Marriage isn't supposed to feel like roommates, but it doesn't have to feel like a war either. Hi, I'm Kameran Alareqi, certified marriage coach and a relationship expert. Every week on Married and Connected, I bring you real talk, hard truths, and practical tools you can start using right away. Whether you've been married 2 years or 42, this is where you'll find hope, encouragement, and steps that actually work. So let's make your marriage feel good again, starting right now. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Married and Connected podcast. I'm your host, Kameran Alareqi. What happens when communication breaks down and children become the battleground? As a clinical psychologist with 4 decades of experience, including serving as an expert witness in high conflict custody cases, today's guest is Dr. David Marcus. He has seen firsthand what tears families apart and exactly how to fix it. We're going to talk a lot about communication in this episode and talk about how he helps couples unlock a practical toolkit to navigate everything from everyday parenting stress to severe parental alienation, helping them build a healthier, connected household, which is what this podcast is all about. So, Dr. Marcus, welcome. So excited to have you today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I really do. Mm-hmm.
So let's jump in. I mean, you've kind of seen it all. You've kind of run the gamut. So let's start talking about emotional communication and what it even is.
Well, emotional communication requires certain capacities. All right. It doesn't just happen, you know. I won't start too early if you want to just talk about couples, but it starts like at the age of 3 when children are acquiring language. All right. And the idea is to come up with well, I'll put it this way. How many times have you heard a parent turn to their child and say, "Don't hit your brother, use your words"?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. All the time.
I had an experience with a couple of brothers. I was talking to the mom, and they were in the waiting room for just a moment, and we hear a scream. And we both went out there, and the 10-year-old's holding his arm crying, and then 8-year-old's looking like I'm in big trouble now.
Yeah.
2 brothers. So mom, of course, turns to them and says, "What happened?" And I'm observing this because I'm a psychologist. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And anyway, and the 10-year-old picks up his shirt and says, "He bit me." And he had teeth marks. I mean, he really got bit. So I feel so bad for the mom. She was totally mortified. She is in the psychologist's office and her kids are biting one another. So she turned to the 8-year-old and said, "I told you to use your words." And he looked at her in all innocence and said, "I don't know how." And I said, "Mom, this is where we need to go."
Yeah.
Parents need to understand one of their initial tasks is to help a child to develop an emotional language.
Yeah.
You expect little children to throw a temper tantrum, but somewhere along the line, they have to learn to use their words and not just act out on their emotions. Because let's face it, a 5-year-old tantrum is one thing. A 17-year-old's tantrum, because they don't have the language, could be jail time. I mean, somewhere along the line, they've got to learn to quote unquote use their words. And that means emotional communication.
I think that even couples, there's a lot of childishness in marriages, especially, with couples that come to me, there's a lot of childishness there. And I think it's because, growing up, in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't a lot. Yeah, I've talked to my mom this so often that there wasn't a lot of resources out there for them to
Right.
learn how to be better parents than what their parents were. So, emotional regulation and, using your words, it was both of you stop or I'm going to give you something to cry about, or both of you stop or I'm going to,
Mhm.
you're both getting
Mhm.
spanked or whatever. So
Right.
I think now I read somewhere not too long ago that we are the first generation. My generation is the first generation that is parenting children while also reparenting themselves. And
That's a good term. I like
it's
that.
it's rough
It's true.
though when you're trying to teach your kids something that you don't know yourself, but you know that that's what the right thing is. So how do we do that? With using our words, where do we even start?
Okay. The first thing is that actually what you're saying is to recognize the fact that there's something missing.
Yeah.
There's a lack of experience that, in growing up, that they never learned truly how to use their words.
Mhm.
All right. Not in any meaningful way. I'll put it that way. You know, and as a result, they defend themselves. And that's what you're getting at. I'm going to describe a process that happens between couples all the time because your audience really needs to understand this and what happens when they get stressed. Because that really gets in the way of communication and it sort of builds up on itself. I talk about being filled up. All right. And let me explain what I mean by that because it's just my own term. This is how I describe it to couples. We all have an emotional space within us. And as you see, I'm pointing to my chest here. We always think of our emotions coming from our heart, but it's really associations in our mind, of course. And now, although we like to think, or excuse me, like to think of ourselves as very logical, at least the people used to say, most of the associations in our mind are emotional and they don't follow that kind of logic. So what happens to this psychological space, this emotional space? Well, it can get filled up with the obvious things, intense emotions, anger, fear, anxiety, frustration. In fact, in little children, you give them a little toy, they get intensely gleeful, and that
Mhm.
fills them up. They can't handle all that kind of inner stimulation. But, in adults, it's usually these negative feelings. So what happens? Well, the first thing that we need to understand is that we know it's happening. We have phrases that describe it, Cameron, like, I've had it up to here, the straw that broke the camel's back. We know. So we're aware. And what does it feel like? It feels bad.
Yeah.
It feels uncomfortable. It feels intense. Sometimes scary because sometimes we don't even know why we're feeling something so intensely. All right. When people come in to see me, they'll tell you why they're coming. And invariably they hit points where they say, I don't know why I feel that way, but I do.
Mm.
Or I know I should be doing this, but something's in my way of doing that. Or they'll say, describe something and they'll turn to me and say, Dr. Marcus, does that sound normal to you? The point is there's a gap there, a gap of understanding. And sometimes it's because it even began on a pre-verbal level. So they never were words for it. You see what I'm saying? So this is a very deep process that we're talking about. What
Yeah.
happens when we get filled up is that we try to deal with it. We focus inwardly and we can do 100 different things. We may get it off our chest with somebody. We may journal it. We may go for a run. We may distract ourselves and watch a television show. But the point is still, we're focused inwardly. And so by definition, Cameron, we are not focused outwardly, which means we are really not hearing what other people are telling us.
Mhm.
And here's where communication can really break down. Another person can give a totally logical, calm explanation for why they shouldn't be so angry. They misconstrued or whatever it might be. And the person hears maybe 5% of what's said that somehow supports their anger, or the tone of voice that makes them angrier. And so the logical person sitting there scratching their head like this, going, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And finally they say, I can't talk to you. It's like talking to a brick wall. And there the walls began to build.
Yeah.
So the implication of what I'm saying, and I've seen this so many times with couples and families, especially high conflict families. Oh my goodness. That's pretty much where I learned this. All right. Um, the obvious implication is you got to empty somebody out. before they can even hear anything you have to say. Now, this is different than catharsis because I always get that question. Oh, you're just telling them to spill their guts. There is a skill to emptying out, and it's emptying out actually happens on three different levels. Now, we can
Okay,
get
talk
into that.
about those levels because I feel like in couples especially where the gap ends up happening is yes, like you're saying, like we listen to respond and not to understand. But
Mhm,
also it's going back to what you were saying about capacities. You've got one person that has the capacity to listen for maybe 2 minutes where the other person could listen for 20 minutes and be fine.
mhm,
So
mhm, mhm.
where do we go with this?
Okay. Okay. How we react to stress is what we're talking about.
Mhm.
In couples, it's very common for one person, let me think about what I want to say. This is how they handle stress. The other person says, no, we got to deal with it right now
Right.
because my stress level is really high. That's very common.
Mhm.
But not understanding that that person's emotional experiences that led them to cope this way or that way is totally different than yours. And saying, hey, you should do it my way. But under stress, we regress back to old ways of dealing with things. And if what we know is to react with, you know, aggression or yelling uh, or getting real quiet and, withdrawing or, these are all things that get in there, basically seeing how our parents react to stress,
Mhm.
and so, this is one reason why children who are abused who grow up and have their own children, they swear up and down and sideways they'd never do to their own kids what happened to them. But under unanticipated stress, and children are really amazing at giving us unanticipated stress,
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
you regress and
Mm.
they'll hit. And they'll regret it terribly after the regression's over, but it gets passed down.
Yep.
So one of the things I talk to parents about is how to become what I call a soothing presence for those for each other and for their children.
Yeah, dig into that.
Okay. This is the main reason I wrote the book that I'm trying to get published called RX Parent Prescription.
Okay.
The basic principle is the soothing presence. What is a soothing presence? Well, in its simplest form, a soothing presence is somebody who's okay when we're not okay. When we think as adults about the people we turn to when we're upset, certain friends, certain family members, perhaps, there are always people who are okay when we think about it, right? And how you notice, okay, notice I'm using the term a soothing presence rather than a soothing person.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. Because you can't be a soothing person if your environment is crazy. If you got a deadline tomorrow and you're fighting with your wife over how to parent and you're under financial stress, all you can do is react. You can't respond. You're always just putting out the next fire. I talk to people sometimes about lifestyle, like, hey, where are you going to find time for yourself in all this? Because the biggest gift you can give your children, this is what I tell parents, is to be okay yourself. They need that. Children are exquisitely aware of how their parents feel. You pick up an infant, Cameron, and if you're tense, they'll cry. So you're not going to fool anybody. You need your own soothing presence. Hopefully your spouse can be one for you or somebody else if you need them. Not, you don't necessarily need a therapist or a counselor. You just need good close friends sometimes who can be a soothing presence or a family member. But you need that because we're human beings. You can't just keep giving of yourself and biting your tongue, for instance, if you don't agree with somebody forever. You just can't do it. So that's why I talk about a soothing presence. Okay. What can we do so the two of you feel you have time as a couple, have individual time, and especially predictable time with your children? Because predictable time is the basis of security and trust, which is a big statement right there in itself.
Yeah, it is because I'm thinking just in my own life, where you've got multiple kids, you've got multiple, events and sports and both parents are working or maybe one partner. I work a lot with aviation couples. So, the pilot is gone for 4 days, anywhere from 4 days to weeks at a time. So the mom is
Yes.
doing everything herself, a lot of times has a full-time job herself. So, like, how do we even get predictable time when we're trying to,
Yes.
manage 19 irons in the fire?
That is the absolute point, Cameron, to tell you the truth. You're absolutely right. I can sit here and proselytize to people and say, hey, thou shalt have predictable time with each other and your children. You know what I mean? How do you do it?
Yeah.
I'm seeing a couple right now with 4 young kids.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And they got 17 sports going and the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And yet we have worked on how they communicate and finding that 15 minutes every day once the kids are in school or in camp or anything to basically have some time before you get into all your work stuff. Or at the end of the day and the kids are asleep, how can we do this? Because it's really necessary so things don't build up, you
Yeah.
know? Um, it takes a lot of work to do that. It takes a lot of thought and planning to do that. I mean, in the old days when there was only like one income families, there was typically mom was home. And hopefully she would provide a lot of that. But it doesn't work that way anymore. 97% of us are two income families now, something
Yeah.
really high. Like
Yeah, it's really high.
I've been an advocate for children for 40 years.
Mhm.
And I'm advocating right now that your children cannot mature emotionally without them being attended to. Their self-esteem, their emotional language, their ability to work out situations and deal with their own stress all comes from being attended to. When we succeed at all that, we have a word that's been bandied about a lot lately, which I sometimes take issue with, resilience.
Mhm.
How do we create resilience in our children? You have to define resilience.
Yeah, I think
It
that's a really
sounds
big
good.
thing. I was just talking to another person that I was interviewing the other day about this because um one of the things that just gets me on my soapbox is when people get divorced and they say, "Well, kids are resilient, they'll bounce back, it'll be fine." And it like nothing I'm a pretty level-headed person, but nothing makes me want to blow my top more than that because kids are not as resilient as we think they are. And then it creates adults that have so many trauma-induced self-beliefs that it's unbelievable.
You're right. You're right. We both deal with couples. I deal with high
Mhm.
conflict cases, etc. And yes, I hear you've had some few of those yourself, I
Oh, yeah.
think.
Oh, yeah. Nothing surprises me anymore.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that's a very profound statement, and I'll tell you why I think it's a profound statement. Because what I've learned in all those years of experience is never think you got it nailed.
Oh, absolutely not.
You know what I mean? Every case is different. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want to call it, is a creative process for that
Yeah,
reason.
it
You
is.
know, you've
It
got
is.
to be humble and walk into a situation saying, we need to get together. I call it a mutual exploration with the people that I see. Sort of empowers them and says, well, I'm in it with you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
To find out what's really going on. I
Yeah.
mean, some of the things we've already talked about, some of these things are unworded.
Yeah.
I just feel this way and I don't know why. Well, until you get to the depth of it, because those are usually the most intense feelings because they started so early.
Yeah.
Uh, until you get to those, I've had couples come in and we've studied where they regress to when they get stressed. They realize, hey, it's 10% what this other person's doing and 90% of what it's tapping into within me.
Yeah.
It fills me up and then I can't hear him or I
Mhm.
can't hear her. So I explain these processes and they go, oh, yeah. And all of a sudden they start to work on, okay, how do we communicate? I had one family, this was funny. I'll share this with your audience. They come in and they say, well, this is what happened. And he said this. No, I didn't. And she said that. No, I didn't. And I'm going, wait a minute. I mean, I can't, sometimes I can put it together what happened, but I can't. I said to her, look, I don't know what's going on. I tell you, next time you guys argue, tape it.
Yep. I tell my clients the same thing.
Yeah. Well, this is the funny part. Okay. I told them to tape it. This is after I've had a few sessions with them already.
Yeah.
And say they came in the next time and they said, we started to argue and I flicked on that tape recorder and I realized that Dr. Marcus was going to hear this and we were really embarrassed. So
Mhm.
they tried
Yep.
some of the things we had already talked about and it went better.
Yep,
I said, I got to remember that one.
I know, I know. No, what I meant by nothing surprises me anymore is that couples will come to me and they think, "Oh my gosh, we're just so far gone. Like we are just the worst couple that you have ever seen." And I'm like, I'm gonna doubt it. Try me. And so then they'll say it, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's not that big a deal. Here we go." Like, and like we work through it. It's a complex problem, but it's not like, a life or death situation, or you know what I'm saying. And so this idea that, oh, you're not going to be able to help me because we're just the worst. I'm like, no, you're actually not. But everything seems like a huge mountain when you're facing it. Whereas if you looked at somebody else's problem, your mountain is actually a molehill.
I do something similar. You're right. I tell them, well, we'll get into that emptying out process because this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When you're just so filled up like that, I'll use my terms, but I think you're using similar terms. Um, it's like the analogy I use is the forest for the trees. When you're in the thick of it and you can't communicate, it's like your nose is right up against this tree
Yep.
and it looks huge. And
Yep.
like there's nothing else. When you empty out somebody and get to a place where you can actually think and talk about, you get what I call a safe emotional distance from it.
Hmm.
Now you can look at it, and which is what a soothing presence helps you to do. Look at it. And then you see that you get some distance from that tree. And now you see, yes, it's a big tree, but it's only one tree.
Yeah.
And it's got boundaries and there are other trees, you know. Very similar to what you're saying. Um, and but it's a visual that they can look at and say, "Oh, okay, now let's together we'll figure out what it is." All
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and that begins the mutual exploration, and we go into how to empty out people, which I'll talk about in a second, and where you go and you regress, and what you've learned to do under stress, and it makes them realize, hey, it's not the other person's fault entirely. It's I didn't walk into this marriage a blank slate, and so we have to figure out what we brought to it.
Right.
Let me let me explain this emptying out process because we keep going around it. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dive into that.
Okay. Um, as I said, what I have found is that emptying out is not exact catharsis or just spilling your guts or whatever you want to call it. Free association is what Freud called it. We can go all the way back with that one. There's a process and there's steps are required. I call them the three levels of emotional intensity
Hmm.
because a lot of the intensity is not right there on the surface. We know this as counselors. So this is just my way of structuring it so they understand what they're trying to accomplish. All right, when they empty out somebody. The most superficial level is the here and now, and we have lots of words, logical words to describe the here and now. And the example I typically give is very simple. You need to take out the garbage. Now, we have lots of words to describe why you should take out the garbage. It's your chore. You know that. It's getting full. The garbage gets picked up tomorrow. Very logical. Let's go to the history level, which is next. This is the sixth time I've asked you to take out the garbage and you
Mm.
haven't done it.
I have a
Right?
teenager. That's very relatable.
No kidding. We won't get into adolescence today, probably, but okay. But anyway, obviously, if you have to ask somebody six times, your asking is going to be a whole lot more intense than the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But if you were not aware of the history, if you just happen to overhear this, you might turn to that person and say, "So what are you getting so upset? What's the big
Yeah.
deal? I didn't take
Yeah.
out the garbage." The logic begins to break down if you don't know. The deepest level, and again, these are just my terms, Cameron, is the tapped into level. The fact that you didn't take out the garbage after I asked you six times to do it means you don't listen to me. I hate when people don't listen to me. My mom would always side with my brother and would not ever listen to my explanation, and he always got away with murder, and I hated that. And this one can go anywhere.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, in the heat of an argument, you're not thinking about that level, but a lot of the intensity comes from that. When you're emptying out, well, it's easy. The top level's there. You don't need to really go into emptying that out because you're already doing it with all the logic. The history level, you're emptying that level out. when you hear things like, "You always do that," or "You
Mm,
never do this." Now they're referring to previous events that made them
yeah.
feel the same way.
Yep.
Or you can even elicit it as a soothing presence. Say, "Has that ever happened before? Have I done that before?" And the deepest level is when they start talking about their emotions. They, "Oh, you frustrate the hell out of me." Tell me about frustration. My guess is I do frustrate you when I do it this way. You know, I'm sure there's something that makes you feel that way. Tell me about it. Tell me about frustration. And now you begin to define that word, their own experience, and this is my experience. And now they can look and say, "Hey, we're different." But
Hmm.
now we can come up with a common definition of frustration, and we know where we both go when we regress in those situations. And if we empty each other out and know where we both go, we're not going to start pointing fingers the same way as
Yeah.
we did before. This is a deep process, so you got to go into their own history, how they were parented, you know, how they internalize, how they react to stress, which is something that we do pick up our family. How do we develop a language where words like support and frustration or whatever else have a common meaning between us?
Yeah, because
That,
as I'm hearing you talk, theoretically this is great. When you're having a disagreement with your partner, you are able to say, "Okay, hold on. Where does frustration come for you? Can you tell me more about that?" Instead of it being you always and you never and no I don't and yes I do and getting well your emotions are your own responsibility. So if you're frustrated that's on you and like stuff like that. So in theory, in the way that you're talking about this is if we are a soothing presence for our partner,
yes.
then if it like so say if I'm the soothing presence and my husband is losing his marbles, he's on like a level 3 at this point, that would be great.
Okay.
But a lot of times, not just couples that you and I work with, but couples that are your average Joe, that's not how this works. And maybe that's the common language that you were about to talk about. One of the exercises that I have for couples when they first start with me is I send them an email and the words in this email, I think the list is like 50 words long. And I have them go through between their second and third session with me and define these words: love,
Hmm.
support,
Hmm.
respect, um,
Exactly.
disrespect, cheating, or infidelity, care, like all of these different words. And they
Right.
have to
Mm.
talk about, okay, what does this mean? So maybe that's where you're going with this. But if it's not that, how do we help these couples that are not able to be a soothing presence
Okay.
in the middle of their partner being at a level 2 or 3?
Okay. You realize, and you're actually right, as far as couples don't come to us first.
Right.
They come down the road. Usually it's at the 11th hour
Yep.
that they finally say, "We need a resource because this is not working. When
An
everything we
average
tried
of
does
6
not work."
years. It takes an average of
Okay.
6 years for a couple
Is
to
that
get.
right?
Yep.
I didn't realize that. But okay.
Yeah.
6 years is a good long time.
Mhm.
And these walls build up and we get to the point where we go, oh, here we go again. And immediately both people are filled up. That's what you're dealing with. As soon as we look at each other, we're filled up.
Mhm.
The couples that amaze me is when they say, "I know what you're thinking and I'm mad about it." I mean, it's pretty amazing, but it's
It's
true,
incredible
right?
superpower right there.
Well, there are these marital fantasies, and they're fantasies. You should know how I'm feeling without my having to tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, you should understand me because you've lived with me for 6 years,
You should
and these,
just know. You should just
you should
know
just
what I
know.
need or what I want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm sure you heard it 100 times,
Mm.
and so, and they get angry and disappointed and they get filled up.
Mhm.
So here you have both people are filled up and everybody wants to be heard and nobody's listening.
Yeah.
And this is where escalation starts. You listen to me. No, you listen to me. No, you listen to me. No, of
Yeah.
course, the more filled up they get. I can't talk to you and walk away. You know,
Yeah.
how do you break that process? First of all, you got to understand there's a process. You come to somebody. This is why I say they come to us when they say it's this or nothing. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
like they're at the end of their rope.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, let's take it easy and try to figure out what's really going on. I
Mhm.
like the term a mutual exploration.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll even have to see in a couple. each one individually at first because they don't feel they can talk in front of the other person.
Yeah.
But I also make it very clear that there's no secrets.
Right.
If you're telling me you're having an affair, don't expect me to sit there and just I'm not going to tell the other person, but I can't treat you without you admitting, that kind of
Right.
thing. But
Right.
no, yeah. But anyway, to see where so they have the freedom to say this is how I see the other person, et cetera, without it becoming, oh no, you got it all wrong, and you're the person. This tit for tat, one-upmanship.
Yeah.
It goes nowhere, and it just fills people up, to use my term. It's an ongoing cycle that only gets worse over
Right.
time. So they're sitting in your office at this point saying, "This is no good. What can you do for us?" Okay, let's look at it, and we start talking about being filled up. We start talking about how you react to stress and how they react to stress. And these are typically eye-opening things. Sometimes we literally have to find the words for it. Sometimes I'll have to do individual work to do that because that's a pretty
Hmm.
deep process.
Yeah.
But it's necessary so they can then know what they're dealing with and convey it to the other person. I'm dealing with this on an individual basis and you're tapping into it. You may not mean to, but that's what's happening. And these are intense things. How do we empty each other out? And everything you said before, 3 kids, no time. You're absolutely right. But what's the answer?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if you don't put aside the time to do this, that's why you may need a grandma around to take the kids for a while and whatever it might be, so that you two can go and not talk about the kids, but talk about each other in a positive communication about
Hmm.
this is tell me about you. I'll empty you out, you empty me out, you know? And it's a discovery, to tell you the truth. So as far as the timing and having the kids that got soccer and my kids won't put on their shoes and hey, it's absolutely the truth. It's
Hmm.
absolutely the truth. And yet, sitting on my perch from on high as a therapist and everything like this, all I can do is pontificate and say, that's all true. But I'm telling you what you eat from each other, and I'm telling you what you need to help your kids to develop. We brought up the term resilience. What is resilience? You know, kids are resilient. Well, a young kid, when they fall down, their bones are softer, they can bounce, where we might get hurt. Okay, is that resilience? Of course not.
Right.
What's emotional resilience? When a child can be soothed, be able to get things from in here to out here within your soothing presence and start looking at things and feels, okay, we're in this together. We're going to solve it together. It's called a merger, of course. And then we figure out something to do about it. You know, first of all, you mirror back what you hear. Child saying this. You empty them out on 3 levels if you can. For young children, you may have to take guesses because they don't have the language yet and try to find those words, but that's another process. But then what you do, you mirror back what you hear so the child knows you're really listening to them.
Does this work for couples too? Does the same
Oh,
process?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is
The
how you're
hard
listening.
part is the part that's tough is biting your tongue because
Yeah.
their perception is going to be very different than yours, and you're going to want to defend yourself and tell them they're wrong.
Sure.
That's the kiss of death of what I'm talking about. Because then
Hmm.
they're going to have to defend. You're going to have to defend yourself when they say arguing emotional perceptions is purposeless.
Right.
It really is because you're not going to convince them that your perception is the correct one and theirs is wrong.
Right.
You want the poison? Just tell somebody, well, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't feel that way. The word ridiculous, you might as well just go home because
Yep.
that'll
Yep.
kill it right there.
It's like telling somebody
Uh,
that's upset to calm down. It's just, it's only
yeah.
going to
Or
escalate things.
telling that to your kids.
Yeah.
That one always cracks me up. Go calm down. Well, if they could calm down, they would.
Yeah.
They don't have that skill yet.
Yeah.
They need a soothing presence that they can take in and they can take in this soothing presence. They can learn this is what their legacy will be. They can think about it, tolerate the intense emotions because they've been emptied out. And the next thing people should say is based on how you see it, no wonder you feel that. What you've actually done is a very common word. It's called respect. When somebody truly listens and, you know, honors your perception, even if they don't agree with it. You don't have to agree with it. You're respected. That's respect. When the child goes through this, feels respected, feels emptied out, now they can hear, based on how you see it, no wonder you had to tell you had hit your brother. No wonder you had to just tell me to go away, whatever it might be. You got to recognize the qualifier. I get very pragmatic with this. I get very word specific based on how you see it, because this person may see it totally different. Of course, I understand why you wanted to hit your brother. Now, thank you for explaining it to me. No wonder you feel that way. You're in the middle of your level that you've been working on for 20 minutes, and he reset the Nintendo. I understand. Um, but my job as your parent is to make sure you're both safe, and I can't do that if you're hitting one another. So what can we do, me and you, to make sure that I don't have to yell at you again or whatever it might have been? We're very close to the thing of it's discipline, but we're not going to go there. Let him come up. Let's see if that works. Maybe you get your time and your brother gets his time, or I'll occupy your brother because he wants to play with you, but you want to play your game, whatever it might be. Um, let's see if it works. All right. So you keep it an open issue. What has the child done? What have you helped the child to do? Well, we have another common word for it, Cameron. It's called wisdom. Been there, done that, can tolerate it. Let's try to do it this way. That's wisdom.
Yeah.
Been there, done that, know what to do is wisdom. And you know what happened? The child has become resilient. They can tolerate their emotions and figure out what to do with them. You know what we call that when it grows up into adulthood? Stress tolerance,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's stress tolerance. And we know how important that is as far as maturation, you know,
Yeah, for sure.
stress tolerance. How are you going to be a good spouse or a good parent if you don't have stress tolerance? And if you're overstressed, you got to figure out something to do, because all you're going to do is put out fires and react to your kids and your spouse or whatever it might be. You won't be able to be a soothing presence for them. You won't be able to complete these tasks that actually really help. Your house will be calmer. The kids won't be running upstairs and trying not to hear you yell at one another. Kids are aware of that. And then I see them.
Oh, yeah. They
And
pick up
then,
your energy big time.
I'm sorry.
They pick up your energy big time. Your
Oh,
kids
yeah,
your kids
absolutely. They feel
feel
the
it
tension. Yeah,
even if you try to only, argue behind closed doors or whatever, they feel the tension.
they know it. They're exquisitely aware of how you feel.
Oh, yeah.
Don't think you're going to kid anybody. And young children, they need their parents to be okay if they're going to be
Mhm.
okay. Of course, when you
Yeah.
hit adolescence, they don't give a darn if you're okay. They just
Yeah.
want to out there to please themselves and their friend. Right. Very egocentric. But
Yep.
in any case, yeah, young children need their parents to be okay if they're going to be okay. It's true. So what do they do in those situations? And this is the heartbreaking part. They take on a role, the pleaser, the placater, sometimes the mediator, the
Yeah.
messenger, you
Mhm.
know? I call those not me situations, because a child's not developing any sense of themselves. They're developing a role. I saw one boy when he was 10, his sister was 8, his parents were always fighting. They were divorced. And he took on the role of the pleaser. Why? Because he wanted to protect his younger sister from the anger that his parents were showing. Okay. He came to see me as an adult about 15 years later. He was unhappy, felt empty. He was involved with a woman who was very high maintenance, was very critical. And he was always trying to please her. He couldn't do it with his parents, so he's going to try to do it through this relationship. Now, of course,
Yep.
that's very common. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
And so I remembered this. In fact, I had the notes on the computer. I mean, everything goes on the computer. And we had our discussions, and I think the second or third session after, let him explain what was going on. I said, "Do you realize you're doing the same thing? You're playing the role." He went, "Oh my, you're right." I mean, he wasn't aware of it. The chemistry between him and this girlfriend of his felt natural,
Yeah.
because that's what he was
Oh,
used to.
that's what he grew up with. Yep. Familiar energy.
Yeah. So hey, this is it. Well, realizing that he got out of that relationship, he did. Didn't take him long, maybe a couple 3 weeks. Couple of 3 weeks. He's a nice guy and a good job. I mean, he's a good guy. He
Yeah.
found somebody new, a much softer, kinder person. You know, about a year later, they got married. They bought a house. Unfortunately, they're underwater, I'm sure. But anyway, they bought a house and they have a kid now, and he's happy. He realized, and he's doing things for himself that he really enjoys, and not just playing the role. He's defining himself. later in life, because usually this happens during adolescence, but he couldn't do
Hmm.
it. So that's what we're dealing with. The whole process that begins very early. People who are young parents, for instance, they can really do themselves and their family and their kids a big favor by considering all this stuff. You can't parent the way you were parented always, because that's not always optimal. And in this day and age, with all the different stressors that we're under, it's not going to work very well. You can't leave work at the office. It
Yeah,
follows you home.
it does.
I mean, you know, in the old sitcoms, Dad would come in from the office, spruce tie, everything's calm, and go to his den and sit in his big leather chair, and you needed permission to come into the den. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Do you know any families like that? I don't.
No, not anymore.
It doesn't work that way anymore. Anyway, the point is made. But this is the process that I wanted to share with you and your audience, because it's deep, but it's important.
Hmm.
The things that get in the way, I'm just mentioning the process that gets in the way. There's other things that people, I mentioned one earlier. Say that's ridiculous. What that basically means is I can't relate to what you're saying, therefore you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, I'm judging you.
Exactly. You know, well, you want to start a fight? You just did. You know who's terrible at this? Attorneys. I've seen of attorneys. What do you mean you feel that way? Give me chapter and verse why you feel that way. What did I do? Oh, no, you got it wrong. Therefore, you shouldn't feel that way. Well, that works great in court.
Yeah.
And it's lousy in a family. All right. It's things that get in the way.
As we wrap up here, I want you to talk about your book and like
Uh,
where people can find you. And then if there's anything else that you want people to know about
mhm.
emotional communication, what they need to know.
Okay. Okay. The book is called Parent RX, like Parent Prescription. It's in the process of being published. It hasn't been published yet. Okay.
Okay.
But if they want information,
What's your publication date, do you think?
I'm not sure. My agent's dealing with that right now. All right.
Okay.
I'm doing these podcasts to build a platform for the book.
Okay. So how can
Okay.
followers find you?
But people can find me on my website.
Okay.
You know, I've done a number of podcasts describing this and other things. All right. The podcast is www.parentrx, one word, PARENTRX .org. And if they want to consult with me, it's on the website, but I'll give them my email address,
Okay.
which is DSMARCUS PhD, DS Marcus PhD at parentrx.org. And people have been calling me to say, hey, you said this, help me define this a little bit better. Or my child is doing X. How do I how do I approach it? The reason I even wrote the book is because parents would come to me and say, boy, I wish I had you in my ear on Thursday night when my
Yeah.
son was doing X, Y, or Z. And of course I can't do that. So the book is actually an explanation of a lot of things that we've talked about already, plus a lot more. And I actually give samples. Parents says, child says, give a situation. Parents says, child says, parents. And I annotate it. So this is what you've accomplished by using these words. This
Mm,
is this is this is what you're trying to delve into here. In different scenarios at different ages, how you soothe an infant is different than how you soothe a 5-year-old. Is how you soothe a teenager, how you soothe an adult. You know,
right.
so all of this explained in the book. I can't go through everything obviously in our
Sure.
podcast,
Yeah.
but I've done a number of things. A talk on discipline, a talk on adolescence. It's out there if they want to listen to that. If they have any questions, they can consult with me.
Last question. You were
Uh,
talking about how we soothe an infant is different than a 5-year-old, is different than a teenager, is different than adult. So as for couples, what would be your number one tip when you do get into a heated discussion to become a soothing presence for your spouse?
okay. Realize that if it's heated, you're both filled up, and you're not
Okay.
going to hear one another. This is a very important point because people just keep going back and forth. It's like a ping pong ball, and it's not going to go anywhere except make that history level more and more intense. So
Right.
the oh, here we go again becomes the automatic response.
Hmm.
Back away. Think about how you want to react. Think about that their reaction is different than yours, not because of you, because they are a different person with different emotional experiences. You need to define these words. You need to define these reactions. Sometimes it takes a counselor like me or you to say, okay, what do these words mean? And what do you mean you don't understand why you feel that way? Let's find out why you do.
Mhm.
That's not a simple process. And the hard part is spouses can't be each other's therapist. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It doesn't work that way. And so again, they come to us at the 11th hour and then we have to, you know, go and do all this work. Before it gets to that point, if you want, in what we do, what you and I do, that phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Mhm.
And what we do, an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure because you're
Mhm.
not building up these walls.
Yep.
You're not building up that, oh, here we go again.
Mhm. Agreed.
When I've had the unfortunately rarer experience of couples coming in early saying, things are not quite right. Things are getting a little seamy. Help us. Oh, that's a walk in the park compared to
Yeah.
people coming to you on the 11th hour. Their kids are up in arms because they're not getting what they need and they're reacting to the kids and to one another. And oh, ugh,
Hours from signing divorce papers and all the things.
ugh,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
very, very bad. Or they're considering custody things, and so they're faking it with you. That's
Yep.
another one with high conflict divorce. They're coming to literally when they're already talking to attorneys, and now they
Mhm.
want to impress you with what a good parent they are. And then it doesn't work that way, folks. If you had come to me 4 years ago, this would have been a lot easier.
Yeah.
But I deal with it because I have to advocate for their kids in those situations. They're playing roles. They're totally upset, and they have nobody to turn to. You know, uh, you were using the child against the other one. You mentioned at the beginning, parent alienation. That's a real thing. Although
It
the
is.
term is well, the term is disputed. You know that the term is actually disputed in court. I've been in court, and I'll tell you the reason why if you want to know. It's simply because we're
Yeah.
talking about it. Richard Gardner came up with that term. He's a psychologist from New York, and frankly, he was a very unpleasant person. People couldn't stand him. He was so arrogant. All right.
Mm.
Uh, and he did no research on this. He just came up with the term. Actually, anybody in this field realizes it really happens. Parents turn their children against the other parent.
Yeah.
That's not. Um, but then the man went on to commit suicide. So whenever you bring up that term in court, the other attorney's going to go, Richard Gardner, and he was a fool, and he had to do no research, and he ended up killing himself. And he's just, he's killing the messenger, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the term I've decided to use, and you're welcome to use it too, of course, is undue influence. This parent is using undue influence in any situation where there's a custody agreement, there's families are splitting up, you know, the one major thing that they tell them, you've got to support the child's relationship with the other parent and their family. I've seen people be arrested for parent alienation, and the
Yeah.
kids are torn apart. They are torn apart. They have to take a side. Who do I believe? Who do I protect? Typically, one plays the victim of the other parent, so they have to protect this parent from the other parent. They're competing for the children's affection, so the child's in the catbird seat and can just demand anything they want. Really spoiled kids, really indulged children.
That's really
Frankly,
hard.
they make me angry as a parent myself, saying, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
You realize that, when this person grows up, they're not going to be happy. They're going to put everybody off. Nobody's going to put up with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting pretty far afield here, but
That's okay.
this is why I advocate for children in these situations, and the earlier, the better. You know, I have told the courts, don't tell me I can't testify. They used to put that in the court order to
Mm.
to have the integrity of the therapy preserved. Take it out. Because if I'm dealing with a narcissistic parent, I have to have the teeth to tell him, you keep this up, I'm telling the court. And you'll
Yeah.
get supervised visits, my friend, if you keep it up.
Yeah. That's really
Well,
important.
so I can testify, and if you keep it up, this is what's going to happen. Oh, I'm not doing that. Yes, you are, because I talk to your kids. I
Mm.
know their emotional perceptions of what's going on, and I'm telling you, this is what they're telling me, and this is what I'm going to tell the court. I'm not just proselytizing with my opinion. I'm telling you what your kids are saying, and I'll tell that to the court, and they'll decide. You see
That
what I mean?
doesn't that come back to the kids though and have it be, then they go home and they say, stop telling the therapist things or you're going to get in bigger trouble or, things like that.
If they do that, they will get supervised visitation.
Mm,
That's part of the spiel, if you want to know.
yeah.
If you're doing that, then you're alienating the child again. If people want to learn these steps and want to be pragmatic and learn the language, you're going to look at the book, you're going to talk to me, or go listen to some other podcasts, because how you say it is so important, and the frame of mind you're in is so important, and understanding what's really going on, the emotional perceptions of your spouse or your children, is key. And I know when parents are doing better, when instead of me telling them their children's emotional perceptions, they're telling me. I tell them the idea of coming to see Dr. Marcus is to get rid of me.
Mm,
Once you've
yeah.
got contact and once you have connection with your kids or each other, you're done. You don't
Yeah.
need me anymore. Or with the young children, you say, come back when your child spikes their hair and paints their eyebrows black and wants a tattoo and a nose ring. Well, we'll have another discussion at that time. You know what I mean? And they have sometimes actually, but
That's funny.
the idea is to get rid of me. I tell them I'm not the agent of change. You are. I'm temporary.
Love
I'm once a week, once every other
it.
week or
Hmm.
something. I'm not going to make the difference. You are. You're the parents. I'm going to tweak your parenting skills rather than saying you're doing it wrong. I'm going to tweak your skills so that you can and make access. Access is influence when it comes to your children. So there you go.
Dr. Marcus, thank you so much for being on today's episode. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and what you are doing is so important. So,
I
listeners,
appreciate it.
if you would please go review the show, and also share this episode with a parent or someone who may also benefit from information about emotional communication. And until next week, stay married and connected.
Okay.
We've all seen it. The messy social media messages, the public tea spilling, and the absolute embarrassment of finding out that your life is a lie through a Facebook post or an Instagram message that your spouse thought was hidden. What if it didn't have to be like that, though? What if you could find out before their affair got too deep? Statistics show that over 20% of marriages deal with infidelity, and most affairs last for years because they thrive in the dark. It's time to turn the lights on. Verified.com is the world's first searchable relationship registry. It's not just an app, it's a digital boundary for your marriage. When you register your spouse on Verified, you are claiming your relationship on a global scale, whether you're talking, you're dating, or you're married. If another man or woman is being told your spouse is single or divorced and they search for your spouse on the registry, they find you instead. Now, here's the game changer. Verified allows you to speak one-on-one and directly with that other person. No gaslighting from your spouse. No he said, she said. No, oh my God, you went through my phone. How could you betray my trust like that? And zero social media drama. Just the truth, person to person, before things go too far. Don't wait for that gut feeling to become a nightmare. Because even if you think your spouse would never, there's an even better chance that you just never know. Register your spouse today using the link in the show notes and lock in your legacy to protect your peace. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional counseling or therapy. Every couple story is unique, so take what's helpful and leave the rest. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that neither I, Kameran Alareqi, Married and Connected, or Recognizing Potential Coaching are responsible for any outcomes related to what you apply from this show, especially if you are not a client of mine.